Hello everyone, welcome to ThinkComputer YouTube channel. In this video, I will explain about constructors. This video is meant for the class 10 ICSE students. Now before I actually begin explaining the topic, I would like to suggest you to go to my channel, hit the playlist ICSE class 10 computer application and watch the previous videos for the class 10 students, so that it will help you to understand the contents of this video better. So what's in this video? Definition of constructor, properties of constructor, use of constructor, invoking a constructor, types of constructors, examples, constructor overloading, working of constructor, use of this keyword in constructor, and a complete program. So let's start with the definition of constructor. We can say that a constructor is a member method of the class whose name is same as the class name but with no return type. So when you look at any class, if you find any method whose name is same as the class name, let's say the class name is employee and you find a method with the name employee, or let's say the class name is student and you find a method with the name student. So that's the constructor. You can easily identify by looking at the name. If the name is same as the class name, then it's the constructor. A constructor is used to initialize the data of the object. So basically constructor is used for initialization. So properties of constructor. These are the properties of constructor. I will be explaining one by one. So let's start with the first one. A constructor name is same as the class name. Just as I said in the previous slide, the name of constructor and class, they are same. A constructor does not have any return type, not even void. Now the thing is, why it doesn't have a return type? And the answer is, it does not require any return type. See, the purpose of constructor is not to return a value. A normal method, when it is written in the class, it may or may not return a value. When we do not return any value, we normally write void. That tells the compiler that the method is not going to return any value. But in case of a constructor, since the purpose is not to return a value, there is no point in having a return type, and hence the constructor doesn't have a return type, not even void. The third point is a constructor is used to initialize the data members of the class, that is data of the objects. So for initialization we use a constructor, okay? Initialization of data of the object. Now the fourth point is a constructor is invoked automatically at the time of creating any object of the class. So basically whenever you created any object of any class, whether it is a predefined class or it is any user defined class, let's say you have created object of scanner for taking input. So you should have written scanner and sc equal to new scanner system.in, right? Or a similar kind of a statement. So you have actually called the constructor. Well, I will explain that in a later slide, but constructor is always called or invoked when the object is created, and it is done automatically. You cannot create the object without calling the constructor. It will be invoked automatically. The next point, the fifth one, is if the programmer has not specified any constructor, then compiler adds a default constructor on its own. So there is a question sometimes students ask, like, what if the class is not having a constructor? Then how the constructor will be invoked? Well, the answer to that question is, it's not possible that the class is not having a constructor. You as a programmer will specify a constructor, and in the case when you have not specified a constructor, you have not written any constructor, then also the compiler will add a constructor on its own, and that's a default constructor. It does nothing. Okay, it is just there so that the class will have a default constructor. The sixth point is a constructor must be declared public or without any access specifier. So this point says that you cannot make a constructor using the private or using the protected access specifier. The reason is because the constructor is invoked automatically and from outside of the class or maybe inside of the class, but if the constructor is declared private or it is declared protected, then the constructor will not be invoked, because from outside of the class the compiler will not be able to access the private or the protected member directly. So that is the reason the constructor must be declared public. Or if you don't want to write the access specifier, you can leave it without any access specifier also, it's going to work. But you cannot have a private or a protected constructor. And the last point, the seventh one, is a constructor can be overloaded just like a normal member method. So I've already explained about method overloading, to have more than one method in a class with the same name but different parameter. Now same applies to the constructor also, it can also be overloaded. We will be discussing that in a later slide. Now the next thing is, what is the use of constructor? So as I said in the previous slide, a constructor is used to initialize the data of the object. So using the constructor, the object gets default values or initial values for its variables at the time when the object is created in the memory. So as soon as you create object of any class, at that time if you want to give a default value or give an initial value, that is given by the constructor. So that is the purpose of having the constructor in the class. Now I have this example here. It's a class employee, and in this class I have two data members, employee ID and name, and this one is the constructor. As you can see, the name of the class is employee and the name of the constructor is also employee. So name is same. There is no return type. So you can see nothing is written before the name of the constructor, and since there is no parameter, this is a default constructor. We will be discussing that in a later slide. So in this constructor we have initialized the employee ID with 101 and the name with default, and there are two methods. So wherever the object will be created, as soon as the object is created, the constructor will be invoked. Now I have another slide. Did you notice any difference? This and this. The difference is, in the second one, means in this one I have written public before the constructor name. In this one I have declared the constructor without any access specifier. So both will work fine, no problem. Now how we invoke a constructor? This way. Suppose the class name is employee, it's the same program. I have added the main method and there I have written employee emp equal to new employee. So employee emp is the object declaration. New operator is for memory allocation, and along with the new operator we write the class name, but it's not a class name, it's the constructor name. Okay, so this part on the right hand side, it's the constructor called, and you cannot create any object actually without writing this thing. Okay, this part. So this part you have to write, and when you write this, the constructor will be invoked or called automatically at that time. You don't have to call the constructors separately. This I have noticed in some of the papers. When I correct papers of students, they sometimes call the constructor using the object. So like they write emp dot employee, so that's invalid statement. I have two more examples here. Employee emp new employee, this is the same one, and this one employee emp2 equal to new employee 100 comma Akash. So this one is the call to the default constructor, and this one is the call to the parameterized constructor. Default constructor is called, you don't have to pass anything, it doesn't require any value to be passed. And the second case here, 100 and Akash, these are the values for the parameterized constructor. Just like a method we can have without parameter and with parameter, we can have in constructor also. So it has four components. The first thing is the class name, the second thing is the object name, the third thing is the memory allocation operator, I mean new operator, and the fourth one is the constructor. Okay, see this one also, this is predefined class, scanner and input stream reader. You already know about it, right? So here also you can easily identify four components: scanner and input stream reader, these are the class names; SC and ISR, these are the object names. New is used in both the statements, so these are the memory allocation operators, and the last one, the scanner here, and the input stream reader, it's the constructor. So whether it is a predefined class or it's a user defined class, constructor is always invoked this way only. Okay. Now let's discuss the types of constructors. There are basically three types of constructors, although if you follow some of the books it says only two. So it's actually default and parameterized. Why? Because copy constructor is actually a type of parameterized constructor only. But still you can say there are three types: default, parameterized and copy constructor. Now I will be explaining each one of them one by one. So let's start with the default constructor. By definition, I can say that a constructor without any parameter or argument, it's called a default constructor. If the programmer will not add a default constructor, then the compiler adds one by itself. So the previous example which I showed you, that was actually of default constructor only. I have the example again here. So here I am showing the same example, and this one is the constructor and this one is the calling of the constructor. Invoking of the constructor is the default constructor because the constructor is not having any parameter. The place of the parameter is empty. So in this kind of constructor, actually the values are predefined. Means when the programmer is writing the program, that time only the programmer will specify the values. Like here the programmer has specified 101 and default. So that will be used whenever the object will be created. Okay. Now next is the parameterized constructor. A constructor having parameter or argument is called a parameterized constructor. The values for the parameters are passed at the time of creating the object. So this second example is of parameterized constructor. Basically I have modified the previous program and added a parameterized constructor. So you can see this constructor here, it has got two parameters, int e and string n. E is giving value to employee ID and n is giving value to name. And when I am creating the object in the main method, there I am passing values 101 and Amit Kumar. Okay. So these are the values. This is how you invoke the parameterized constructor. You pass the value. Now I have to remember that when you are passing values to the parameterized constructor, the number of values, the type of values all should match. That means if your parameterized constructor requires you to pass integer and string, then you have to pass integer and string. You cannot call it with one value. Now the next is copy constructor. A copy constructor is a special type of parameterized constructor where we use a class objects in the parameter of the constructor. In this type of constructor, the values of existing objects are used copied in the new object which is created. Copy constructor has got object as method parameter. So if you remember correctly, if you have seen my previous videos, so in the previous videos I have explained this topic, object as method parameter. So it is when you pass class objects through the method parameter, okay, and the method uses the data of that object. Same kind of concept is applied in the copy constructor when you pass an entire object which is already created, and using the values of that created object, you initialize a new object. Now let's see this example. In this example, I have modified the same program class employee, and this one is the parameterized constructor and this one is the copy constructor. So when in the void main the first object of the class is created, then that object has got the value 101 and Amit Kumar. Because the parameterized constructor is being called and we are passing two values. But in the next case, in this last line, employee emp2 equal to new employee emp, so here we are passing an entire object. So it's actually constructor overloading only when you have more than one constructor in a class. So like first one is the parameterized constructor and second one is the copy constructor. So one thing you need to know at this point, and that is you cannot have a copy constructor directly in the class without having any other constructor, because the purpose of copy constructor is to initialize an object with an existing object with the values of existing object. But if there is no other constructor, then how the first object will be initialized, right? Did you get my point? So you cannot have a copy constructor in any class without having a default or a parameterized constructor. Okay. So when you pass an entire object, the compiler will find the copy constructor and call the copy constructor. But the thing is that how it is transferred. Is it passed by value or passed by reference? So if you have seen my previous video, then you already know that when we are passing object through the parameter, it's passed by reference. We are sharing the reference of any existing object. So basically when you pass emp, you share the reference of emp with e1. Now in the constructor, wherever I write e1.empid and e1.name, I mean to say emp.empid and emp.name. So copy constructor takes the reference of any existing object and uses the data to initialize a new object. That means using the data of EMP, that means 101 and Amit Kumar is given to the new object. So the new object also has got the values 101 and Amit Kumar. Now let's talk about constructor overloading. So constructor overloading means to have more than one constructor in a class, right? Just now you saw in this previous slide. As all the constructors will have the same name as of the class, so we can say that constructors are overloaded by default. Now in order to overload any two method, as you already know, we need to use the same method name. That is the definition of overloading also, right? That if two or more methods are having same name but different parameters, then it's overloaded. Now in case of constructor also, if you see, the names are always same. So you cannot have two constructors with different names because all of the constructors will have the same name as of class, right? So if you have three constructors, obviously all three of them will have the same name. So they are overloaded by default. Now I have this example here, and in this example I have used all type of constructors. You can see this is the default constructor, this is the parameterized constructor, and this is the copy constructor. So when the first object is created, emp0, nothing is passed, so the default constructor will be invoked. In the second line, when emp1, the second object is created, we are passing one number and one string, so the second constructor will be invoked, that is the parameterized one. And in the third case, emp2, in that case we are passing the entire object emp1, so we are calling the copy constructor. Okay, so in any class if you have two or more constructors, then it's called constructor overloading. Now I have another example in which I have again used multiple constructors, but in this one I will show you the working by doing the dry run. So let's dry run this program now. Okay, so here I'm going to do the dry run of this program. As we know that the program will start executing from void main. So from this point the program will start. So in the first step, demo d1 equal to new demo. So that means the first object of the class is created, which is d1. Now you should know that each object of the class has a separate copy of the instance variable, right? So the first object d1 will also have a separate copy of num. Now here when the first object is created, obviously the constructor is called, but there are three constructors. This is the first one, this is the second one, this is the third one. Now which one will be invoked? Depending on the value which you are passing, right? So in this case we are not passing actually anything. So when we are not passing anything, the default constructor is invoked. So this constructor will be invoked, okay? And this constructor is going to initialize the number with 100. So I can write here in this case that the number is 100 for the first object. First step is complete. In the next one we have system.out.println d1.get. That means we are printing the return value of the get method. Now we have a get method in this class which is just returning the value of number. So if we write d1.get, it will return the number of d1, means first object. So what is the number of d1? 100. That means on the screen it should print 100 and it will move to the next line. Okay. Now after that we have got here demo d2 equal to new demo. So we have created one more object which is d2, and obviously the second object d2 will also have a separate copy of the number. Okay, so for the second object, when we are calling the constructor, we are basically passing here 500, which is a number, right? So we are passing something means the parameterized constructor will be called. Okay, since we are passing a number, so this one will be called the second one. So we are passing 500, right? So 500 is going to the variable n, and from n it will go to num. So we can say that for the second object, the number is going to be 500. Okay. Now after that we are printing and we have written d2.get. So the return value of get for the second object. So get will return the number, and for the second object number is 500. So it's going to print 500 on the screen, and then the cursor will move to the third line. After that we have got here demo d3 equal to new demo. So the third object is created. Now let's say this is the third object, and the third object will also have a separate copy of the number. Do you see here for the third object, when the constructor is getting called, we are passing the return value of d1.get and d2.get. So now first we have to complete this statement, and then the sum the value which we will get will be sent to the constructor. So what the d1.get will return? Obviously it will return 100 because the first object d1 has the value 100 and for the second object it has the value 500. So we have got here 100 plus 500, that is 600. So basically we are passing here 600. So 600 will go to the constructor here and n will become 600 and through the n it will initialize the number. So we can say that for the third object the value is going to be 600. Okay. Now after we got the value 600, then in the next line system.out.println d3.get. So the get method for the third object will return the number and the third object has got the number 600. So on the screen it will print 600. Now after that we have got the fourth object d4. So the fourth object will also have a separate copy of the number. So let's say this is the number. Okay. When we are calling the constructor here, we are not passing any number, we are actually passing an object. So d2 is an object, right? So when you pass an entire object, it will call the copy constructor. So it will directly call this constructor. Now we are passing d2. That doesn't mean we are passing the value of d2. As I said, whenever we share object, we share the reference. That means we are sharing the reference of d2 with obj. Now where is d2? This one. So I can say that obj and d2 both now refer to the same memory. So we can say that obj and d2 both are same. But we have not given a copy, we have shared the reference. So anything I do with obj, I am doing with d2. Remember that. So here I have written in the constructor obj.num. So since obj and d2 both are same, we have shared the reference. So obj.num means d2.num. So what is the num of d2? The num of d2 is 500. That means d2 here will give the 500. obj.num will be 500. So num equal to 500. The present object is getting the value 500. Okay. Now after that the last line here is system.out.println and d4.get. Call the get method for the fourth object. So it will return the number and the number for the fourth object is 500. So on the screen it should print 500. So the output here is 100, 500, 600 and 500 in 4 different lines. Now let's discuss about use of this keyword in a constructor. I have already explained about this keyword, but not in constructor, in a normal method. So just like in a normal method, we can use this keyword. We should use this keyword when we have any parameter name or any local variable name, which is same as the instance variable name. Okay. So as you can see in this example, in this class demo, the instance variable has the name num and the local variable, or we can say the parameter, has the variable num. So whenever the same variable name is used in the class, I mean as an instance variable, and in the method or in the constructor as a local variable, whether in the parameter or inside the method. So in that case, whenever we are using num directly, it refers to the local variable. So this dot num equal to num means the number which we are passing through the constructor will be given to the instance variable. In simple, I can say this dot anything means it refers to the current object, the object for which the constructor is called. So here in the void main you can see demo d1 equal to new demo. So the constructor is called for the object d1. This dot num means d1 dot num. In any constructor, when you see this keyword, it refers to the object for which the constructor is called. So this dot num means d1 dot num. That will become 500 by running this statement, and when it is printed on the screen, it will print 500. Now I have a complete program to explain constructors. So I have this class here. The name of this class is myString, and there are two data members, I mean instance variable, str and new str. Str is the main string and new str is the new string. Then we have got here two constructors. One is the default constructor, one is the parameterized constructor. The default constructor is initializing the string and the new string with empty string, okay, and the parameterized constructor is initializing the main string str with s, which we will pass, and the new string with blank. And there is a method midword. It will accept any word and it will return the middle characters of the word, and if the word is having length less than 3, then it will return empty string. As you know that if the length is less than 3, then there is no middle character, so it will return empty string. And there is a method void generate. It will generate a new string from the existing string str by invoking the mid word method. Then it will store the new string in the variable new str. Okay, for an example, if the string is hello, hi, how are you, so the output will be ELLOROU. So in the word hello, the middle letters are present ELL. In the word hi, nothing is present because there is no middle letter. Okay. In the word how, O is present, that is the middle letter. In the word R is present, only R, that is the middle letter. And in the word U question mark, OU is present, these are the middle letters. Question mark is also part of the word U. Okay. And then we will call the methods in a void main. So let's see the program of this. So here is the program. I have created the class myString. I have declared the instance variable, both of them, str and new str. This is the default constructor in which I have initialized both of them using empty string. And this is the parameterized constructor in which we will be passing a string s, and using s we will initialize the main string, and the new string will be initialized with empty string. Then we have got this method midword, where if the length of the word is less than 3, then directly return empty string, else return the middle letters. So using the substring method of the class string, you can directly take out the middle letters by writing this w.substring 1 comma w.length minus 1. Now let's say the word is having length 5 characters. Suppose the word is hello. So starting from the index 1 means starting from the second letter till less than w.length minus 1. So last word minus 1. So it will give you all the middle characters. Okay. And it will return it directly. Now in case if substring is not allowed to use, okay, in your school, in your institution, then you can use this logic. Take a variable, suppose nw, run a loop from 1 till the length minus 1, take out every character, append it to the variable, and then return the variable. So this is an alternative method which can be used if you are not allowed to use the substring method. And here in this last one, generate method, we have taken one variable w to store the word. Actually we will be taking out characters from the string and forming word. Then we will be passing each word to the method midword to get the middle characters. So we are taking a variable w and initializing it with empty string, and then in the main string we are adding space. Then in the loop we are taking out characters, we are forming word, and then when the word is formed we are passing it to the midword method, and it is returning me the middle characters. Now in case if the return value is empty, means nothing is getting returned, so that means the length is less than 3, so we will not append anything. And only when the return value is a string, means not empty string, then we will append it to the new str, and we will make the w, means the word, blank again, and we will print the new string. In the void main we have only called the generate method. Okay, I am running this program and showing it to you. The output here, if we pass the string hello, okay, hello, how are you, if I pass that, then I am getting this return value ELL and then O and then R, then OU. So as I showed you in the sample input output, same output we are getting here also. So that's all for this video. Please do like, share and subscribe to my channel, and stay tuned for more videos.